absolutely nothing is impossible.
Hello and welcome. I'm your host Pritish Sanyal, and you're listening to the 1% Project. Conversations that will help you understand how some of the smartest minds build, scale, and operate new ideas and ventures. If you enjoy these conversations, do share and subscribe. My next guest on the 1% Project is the young and dynamic founder of Pesto Tech, Ayush Jaiswal. This is an intriguing conversation with Ayush, who is on a mission to give everyone equal access to opportunity. In this chat, we explore how his personal background of coming from a second-tier city and early professional hustle helped him find purpose, value time, and build a business with an impact. Welcome, Ayush, to the 1% Project.
Thanks for hosting me. Glad to be here.
I was going through your career path, and you started young, and you're still young. The two people who came to my mind when I was thinking about your trajectory, who have actually started from second, third tier cities and started really young. One is Ritesh Agarwal, who went on to build Oyo Rooms. The second one is the legendary cricketer who recently retired, MS Dhoni. Ritesh comes from an unknown town in one of the states from India, and MS Dhoni comes from Ranchi. And when I see their trajectory and what empowerment they have brought to second, third tier cities youth, where they don't have to restrain themselves in the constraints of thinking they don't have the resources to be world leaders or game changers, they definitely have helped and empowered those youth. And your story, which we would like to know, is definitely on a similar path. So how did you start off and where are you now?
Got it. I mean, as much as I would like to accept this point, I agree with you. No, I'm just kidding, but it's just sort of your bias because you're from Lucknow and I'm from Varanasi. Just putting it out there for the listeners. You're hyping me up, but they've done a phenomenal job. I'm absolutely nowhere near them, nor do I compare from them. What I do is that I seek inspiration from them. There are a lot of things to learn from these people and many more. So definitely excited about the journey. The small town thing we were just talking about before the sort of recording, that there are certain problems you face, challenges you face in the initial years, and the grind was quite beautiful. When I look back at it, I know that many other people face it, and I try my best to support as many people as I can in my own sort of small capacity. But it's exciting.
When you started off in Varanasi, this is not your first business. You started off with a consulting service, and there was something called as deal flow as well. And when you were doing that, how was that experience? You failed at them or were not as successful. How did you go from those kind of setbacks to Pesto?
I wouldn't say that I failed at them. Sort of, and calling it that they were not successful is just a bloated term. I'm saying that the reason I feel I did not, it was a very terrible failure, and terrible failure in the sense that the business failed in a very bad way. But if you ask me, did you fail or not? I would not say that I failed. Reason being that those years trying to build something in Varanasi or trying to build deal flow, which was like a sort of exchange for secondary equity in companies. I faced some regulatory challenges and things I was not aware of. I was just ambitious and I wanted to do something in the space. The journey is the biggest teacher which you can have. I was very fortunate to have really good mentors, and the process of building it and the process of failing over and over again teaches you certain things which stays with you in long term. And then there's a very sort of straightforward process of learning from others and what you have learned, helping others out with that knowledge. So I look at it that way, that it was a failure, yes, and I had a very rough time in those days and all that. I would highly not recommend people to take the same approach to the journey. There are better ways of doing it. There are ways in which you need to struggle less. Just because the struggle is inspiring doesn't mean you have to struggle. I see that a lot of people do it because it sounds nice. But it's very tough to live through it. The alternate ways are Much preferred.
That's a very good insight. Do you think struggle is a mindset? You think that we think that we need to struggle to get to a point in our lives?
Yes. So I'll put it this way. The other day I was chatting with one of my very good friends, and we were chatting about struggles. And I was also sitting with somebody, his name is Manish, and we were talking about our lives. And it was very interesting that every person's struggle was real struggle, but in their own ways. I've also heard stories about people in which they struggled because they could not get to a certain checkpoint because they did not have money for toll, and they had to request people that you sort of didn't have money, and let them in and things like that. And it's a very genuine struggle, like whoever had it. But if you look at it from somebody else's perspective, that person was driving a car. Right? So you would say you had a car. Like, so many a times when I look at somebody else's journey, so that was somebody else's story. I'm not allowed to name them, but it's a cool story to know. And at the same time, when I look at my story, I feel that the struggles which I had, I really don't want to call it struggle because it's embarrassing. Because when you look at people who have had much bigger struggles in their lives, you just feel how small you are, right? So we should just take this as a journey. We should not glorify it. We should not be proud of it. It's just a journey, right? Everybody has a very different journey. They will have their own set of challenges,
Yeah.
and on the other side, they will have their goals. So it's as simple as that.
And what did Varanasi give you that a key city at that point of time would not have been able to?
Values. When you're trying to get to something, like I remember in 2007 and 8, I was like a crazy person. I would read each edition of all the magazines which used to come in at that point of time. I used to find my ways to get internet, but it was hard to get internet. It was hard to get access to a computer, and you don't really find a community of people in which you can sort of spend your time with, where you can learn things from, like mentors are not there and all that. So I feel that those limitations is something which I cherish, because those limitations really taught me things which I wouldn't have learned otherwise. They taught me creative ways of learning. I spent almost all my time on the internet after a point, and just learning from books and whatever resources I could get my hands on. But once you go through those barriers, the newer challenges look smaller to you. So that mindset gets built when you are from a small town. And the second thing which is there, my dad has taught me a lot of things. One of the biggest things he taught me is that money is relative. He always keeps me humble, and always tries to point me in a direction where I have clarity of my mission, that what is it which I'm really working for. And there's a very beautiful thing he taught me early on, that 5,000 is very expensive, and 50 lakhs is very cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because money is relative to what you have. So no matter where you are in the journey, money will remain relative. What you should focus on is doing things ethically, by being true to your values, and by being focused on the goals which you are trying to achieve.
Everything is relative. Yeah, absolutely. 5,000 can be very grandeur, and 50 lakhs could be nothing. Your perception of time and purpose evolves and you mature. So, how do you see time now?
Oh, as the most valuable asset. It's very underrated. I've learned it in a very hard way, that I used to undervalue time versus money a lot, just undervaluing. And we all do it in our own different ways. But I just think that valuing your own time is one of the most important things, because unless you value it, nobody else will. And if you just optimize it, the compounding value of that is immense. Like, for example, I would focus on reading. One of the things, habits, is focus on reading a book 30-40 minutes a day. There is no immediate impact which will happen in a day or two, but if you're disciplined, then that means that you're allocating 30 minutes of your life to reading books. But if you look at the compounding value, that 30 minutes over the next 300 days will be a lot. So I look at time from that investment perspective now, that what is it which you're investing your time in?
Yeah.
And then what is the goal which you're trying to achieve with that?
At the same time, even your purpose evolves. At one point, when potentially you didn't have a very good bank account, survival was one purpose. But once you have a
I still
survival,
don't have a good bank account.
it is better than yesterday.
For sure, yeah, for sure.
So at one point, it was survival. And then at some point, you actually come to an understanding that purpose is greater than yourself. It is potentially doing more and for others as well. So how has that evolved for you?
It's beautiful. So one of the things I'm a big fan of is that whenever you're trying to build something in a sustainable way, whatever business you're trying to build, while building that business, there are actually ways out there in which you can create a win-win situation for all parties involved, because of which the business scales and the impact scales with it. And those are the favorite kind of businesses which I love getting involved in. It's aligned with all the values which I have, the impact skills and the business skills. So love working on those. I try my best to sort of include those values in the way we are building Pesto, and I'll continue to do so in times to come.
Now let's talk about Pesto itself. So
Mhm.
firstly, how did the name come about?
It's just a friend of mine was eating pasta. Right? That's that's the
That's it.
pasta. That's it. Like there is no science behind it. There is no thought. One of the biggest things which I've learned over the last few years personally is that speed of decision making and execution is extremely important when it comes to startups. And at Pesto also we have made mistakes. We have had phases in which we were slower in making decisions, and that did not really help us. So from that perspective, I had a moment in that year where I was like that we need to do something about this industry, and I just wanted to start. And I sat down that day itself, discussed a bunch of names, and decided the name and went with it.
You came to Delhi almost 4 years ago, and I'm assuming then Pesto was a very small company. Now it's something which potentially the tech world knows of. So how has that growth been, and where are you today? And where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
We have I feel we are not even on the surface. There is a massive amount of impact which is to be made. I feel 5 million developers are there in India alone. I feel that the biggest competitor, I always say, for Pesto is unemployment. There are more than million jobs in the Western countries, and there are just not enough developers to fulfill those positions. And on the contrary, there are some 4 million developers in Europe. There are 5 million developers plus in India, and more coming in every year. And that opportunities are very local in nature historically, because of which this problem was not solved. And in last few years, technology has evolved in a much, much faster way. 3 years ago, I saw GitLab, Zapier, and a bunch of other companies who were really doing amazing stuff when it comes to remote work. I looked at their handbook and all the blogs they wrote, and it logically made sense to me. Like most of my life has been based on decisions which I took based on pure logic. Like I went to college, I looked at the curriculum, it was not benefiting me, I left. So it wasn't an emotional decision that I'm going to do something krantikari, right? It was that okay, whatever Steve Jobs or these guys dropped, so you will also. This is how a lot of emails I get are on those lines. It's the wrong way to think about it. I feel purely from a logic perspective, I thought remote work is the way to go, and I could see the path to that change happening. That transition period. The transition period was probably longer than what we have now. It's like what I was expecting to happen in let's say 3 to 5 years time happen in 3 to 5 months is pretty massive. But remote work is something which is pretty amazing. All of those job positions which were not closed earlier now have the potential to get closed, and it is good for everybody. It is good for talent because they get access to those opportunities. It is good for companies because finally they will have more people to do things. And the world only needs more developers with the world going remote. So the next 2 to 3 years, I'm really excited about the growth in short term. And from a long-term perspective, over the next couple of decades as well, the future of software development is pretty, everything which hasn't been disrupted by tech will probably get disrupted by tech in next decade or so. So I'm
True.
excited.
So an engineering course is 4 years and your program is 3 months. So how does all the 4 years come in that 3 months? What is the secret sauce there?
No, again, like I would have loved to take credit there, but it's the wrong way to think about it. The value proposition is very different. I do think that there are things which you can do in a much more efficient way than engineering colleges, but at Pesto we haven't built anything yet to replace that. In future, maybe. What we do in those 3 months is that we take developers who have gone through that engineering and probably have basics right, and they have done some really good work at Indian companies. We try to take that talent, we try to give that sort of last mile sort of knowledge which they need to sort of culturally align them with global standards or of good companies which are out there, and then we help them get jobs. So 3 months is not going to be a replacement for your 4 years. I wish it was, but it's just different value proposition.
I'm very intrigued to understand, how do you convince employers to employ people who graduate from your school and pay them industry salary when they know that they can actually potentially hire somebody equally qualified at a lesser salary?
That is actually not true. So I'll explain how. So a hiring process involves certain stages. There is discovery, there is sourcing, there is sort of shortlisting by elimination, then there is interview process, and then there is cultural fitment, which a company goes through. I disagree that you can find the same or a better talent without, otherwise we should not exist, ideally. And I also agree that if companies want, they can potentially do that. It will just involve a lot of time, and the efficiency is lower there. So what we are trying to focus on is increasing the efficiency of that entire process. And I'll tell you the problem statement in a very, very simple way, that as companies go global with respect to talent acquisition, the amount of applications you will receive on a particular job post, because a job post was earlier open to only people in Delhi, now it's open to people in Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, Africa, maybe all over the world. When that happens, what is going to change is that the cost of interviewing is going to get much more high. The amount of time you will need your engineering team to dedicate to hiring will be very tough, because engineers don't like interviewing people day long. So that is a big problem. So what the change in recruitment universe which will come in will be that recruitment will have to evolve. People will look at pre-filtered candidates who are the fit, and all the job which is done by a company in that recruitment process, except cultural fitment test, will have to be done by somebody else externally. And that is something which we are trying to sort of eliminate, automate, and do all of those things.
What are your learnings from your micro VC fund?
So it's not my fund, by the way. Like, I feel Ritesh says it's mine, but it's not mine. All the credit goes to Ritesh. It's all his angel investments which he took and he converted into a fund. He's just a very dear friend, like a brother to me, and he's also a very humble person, and he's awesome, basically. So he tries to give credit.
For the listeners, who's Ritesh?
So Ritesh is the founder of Innovate, and he also invests in a lot of startups. So that out of the way, it's not my fund. But in the meantime, when I was sort of working out of Innovate, and then I started working with Ritesh, and I moved into his house. It was a phenomenal experience. I was very kind to. I was just hungry to learn a lot more, and he was very kind to give me those opportunities. The experience of working with the portfolio, helping them out, fundraise, helping them out with talent acquisition, etc., are the things which really taught me a lot of things. It was because my goal being at Innovate, the co-working space, was that I wanted to work with a lot more startups and help them. And I did that for more than a couple of years. And I did that selflessly. I used to work with most of them for free. And working with a fund was just my hack to get to work with more startups and help more startups. So it was just a means to feed my passion and hunger. And it was pretty awesome. Some of the really good friends which I have today are actually the portfolio of Gorilla.
And now that you've seen so many startups grow, you have helped them, you've built your own very successful startup. What are the three elements do you see when you look at a business today?
So a bunch of irregularities. I'll just clarify that. A, we are not successful yet. We haven't done 0.1% of what we want to. B, I'll share my views, but I would say that I have still a lot to learn, and my views will be strictly based on my experiences with Pesto rather than judging other companies. A few really good things which we learned in the journey was that building the culture is important. This is what I had heard, and I read almost all possible books I could on culture, and I read a lot of goods, right? But it's very hard to find material which actually teaches you real execution. And when you explore that, when you discover that, then you realize, oh, this is what we were talking about when that book said X. The culture of high performance and accountability is something which I've learned in the past, that no matter what you want to optimize for, building that culture of high performance and accountability and having the people in the team is extremely important. I've read a lot of places that people are the most important asset of the organization. I believe it's wrong. I feel that people are the most important assets for an organization. Right? So making sure that you hire the people is one of the biggest learnings so far. Then I've learned that speed, identifying the markets, like identifying a niche market which is niche enough so that it does not get attention of the other players in the market at that point of time, is important. And as you're basically betting on that market to grow and become larger in size, so identifying that when starting up is something very interesting which I had learning of. That identifying that niche market, growing your startup with the growth of the market is a beautiful experience, a good way to build the startup. And apart from that, I would, if given a chance, what I would love to have at Pesto, or things which we did, there are a lot of wrong things which we did, but one of the things which we did was customer obsession. With respect to execution, there will always be gaps in terms of whenever you scale, you will always want to scale quality. You would always want to serve all your customers well, but having that as a part of your DNA, in which you're prioritizing people over journey over destination, that in DNA is something which I crave for. I try to push it at Pesto, and I cherish that a lot. Just focusing a lot on customers and making sure that you're obsessed with their experience.
True. And you talked about culture, and your company has a 4H and a D culture. There are 4H's and a D in your culture. So tell us about that, and what does that mean?
I'll talk about that, but I'll also say that I would not encourage people to seek inspiration from this and start going after 4H and D, because it also might be one of our mistakes. But I'll tell you the good parts, the bad parts. 4H and D, we decided that we used to filter people basis cultural aspects, and 4H's are being happy, humble, honest, and hungry. And D is having the discipline to execute towards a particular goal. Sounds fancy, and I would have loved to say this without correcting myself, but I would not do justice to anyone who's listening to this. Along with that, it's your culture is basically a reflection of what you actually practice day in day, and nothing which you talk about. When you talk about something, it reflects into your practice. So focusing on high performance and accountability, apart from the fancy parts, which is 4H and D, is extremely important as well. And that has been our learning over the last couple of years that we have changed in that.
So I'm assuming that there are a number of, and this is a great example where you have initially implemented something, learned from it, and refined it. And every time that principle, that thought has actually become better. And one of the secret sauce for your success is that you have been very upfront in saying that we learned this and this was the part. So let's combine it and make it and go to the next level. So if somebody, let's say there is an Ayush in a second, third tier city today thinking of starting a business, what would be your framework for them?
Interesting. So as I said earlier, that I actually am not on board with the whole hustle part. There is no shortcut. You will have to hustle in any journey which you be on, and you just can't skip it. But you can make that hustle more efficient. And to make that hustle more efficient, I would actually very highly recommend people to learn from the mistakes of others. And I've been very open on this podcast also about sharing the mistakes we have made. Like, it may sound a little less fancy, but unless I say that, people won't learn from it, the learnings which we have. And I'm sure that a lot of things which we believe are the ways of doing things will turn out to be the wrong ways in future. It's like, keep doubting everything. For people who are in tier 2, 3 cities, I actually help 2 to 3 people at a time every weekend to just help guide them. I interact with people who are thinking of doing an MBA, they dropped out for a couple of years, or people like that who are having no idea what to do next. And as much as they are trying to learn from me, I also try to learn from them that what are the things which are most important. So the few bullet points that if I have to share around how they can actually sort of uh, get started and be on a decent path. Success depends on their hustle and execution. I would say that point number one is that absolutely nothing is impossible. Like, always, like, doubting yourself is correct, but looking at those doubts in an objective way is looking at those doubts as identifying the problem and fixing it. As but having the confidence that you can actually do whatever you think of doing is extremely important. People lack that confidence. I used to shake when I attended certain conferences in Delhi, and I just wanted a corner to myself, and that happens. But having that confidence is important. The second part is that making yourself aware. Like, I have a thesis that earlier people learn things from their guru, right? Like, I had certain teachers in my hometown who used to teach me a lot of values in life, right? Like, my English teacher, Manish, and my computer teacher, Vineet sir, was there. Both of them taught me English and computer science, but apart from that, they taught me many other things. There was no internet there, right? Now, if we look at a few decades earlier, there was absolutely no internet, and knowledge transfer happened from a teacher to a student. And a lot of times that was dad to a son, right? That is why certain professions were family driven. That has changed. Access to information has changed. Now you have access to all the information on the internet. All you need is the guidance and sincerity. So my theory is that if you're from a small town, you need two things. One is having confidence in yourself that you can actually achieve the goals which you want to. And two, having sincerity and hunger. That's it. Believe me, it doesn't matter where you are. You have access to all the information in the world. And thanks to Geo, now everybody has access to it. This show is not sponsored by Geo, by the way.
Yes, it is not.
But everybody has access to internet. The third thing, if I would want to prioritize, if I can, is finding a mentor who has been there and that makes the process a lot more efficient. And people who are listening from small towns, they always think that they're not in Delhi, so they can't find a mentor. I would say that make this assumption, but make this assumption after you send 500 emails and reach out to 500 people. If you get 500 no's, then accept it. But if you haven't tried, then be aware of the assumptions you make, because it's not true. So
that's a response and a framework. One thing that I will add to that is when you send out those 500 emails, and I have done it myself, you should not be disappointed at 499 no's. You should be superbly excited that somebody one has said yes, because that is your gate to success. So I completely agree with that.
And if I got a yes after on the 1 yes in out of 500 emails, I would actually not feel a thing about 499 rejections. I would create a framework in my mind that, okay, for everyone, yes, I need 500 more people. So let's reach out to 2,000 people and get 4 opportunities, right? And it's just a numbers game. It's a very logical. And
failure is not emotional. It's just an outcome.
Right? Yes.
And the minute you detach your emotions from a failure, you keep progressing in life.
It's emotional as well, by the way. I cried a lot, but anyway.
I'm sure we all will cry, but we need to think it's not emotional.
You need to think it's not emotional, but it's okay if you feel emotional. It's okay. You just don't have to stop.
Okay, my last question, and this is, for me, it's interesting. When you told your parents that you're going to Delhi, what was their reaction?
Every aunt, every grandmother in the house, and so I was, being from a small town, if you are accidentally the only son in the extended family, everybody by default thinks that they need to protect you a lot. And I'm fortunate to have that love, but at the same time, everybody tried to make me be in Varanasi, and it was a very tough decision to get out of there. Like, just I tried to explain them the things which I'm chasing, and I needed to expose myself to a larger world. So it was tough convincing them, but I somehow joined the college, and my parents have been very supportive of things which I think of doing most of the times. So I as fortunate to get here, but you can imagine that if it took so much of hard work to join a college, what it would look like to leave it in 6 months.
And especially from a Varanasi or a Lucknow, I'm sure it's much more tougher.
100%. But it was very easy for me. I just thought we should leave it and not tell anyone, and that was one less problem to have. Again, I don't endorse that decision, but it was one less problem for me to have.
So now a rapid fire, 3 questions, one word or one sentence, easy ones. So the hardest thing about your job?
Delegation.
One book or blog that has transformed you personally and professionally?
paulgraham.com.
If not Pesto, then what?
That is a very hard one. Something on the lines of making opportunities more universal in nature, getting those opportunities to the youth which are there in different parts of the world, but they don't necessarily get exposed to. Bridging that deficit is something, is the same mission I would want to associate myself with. It may happen in the form of a job board, it may happen in the form of a education company, it may happen in many different forms. But this is a problem which I very, very emotionally and logically reflect with, like, or relate with. That is the same problem statement I would like to work on.
Ayush, it was having you on the show. Thank you for your time.
It was good being here. It was fun chatting. Thanks for hosting me.
You can find the show notes for this episode and every other episode on 1%.live. If you enjoyed this conversation, share it on social media and leave a review. See you next time.